Victory at Ostagar by Arsenault de Blasonville. Chapter 3 Warlords of Ferelden. That, Alistair told her as they left the High Ever camp, was impressive. You're quite the little rabble-rouser, aren't you? I hope so, Bronwyn said, still stirred up, but I'd do even better with some breakfast. Breakfast. And it was ready when they stepped into the tent. Bowls of oat porridge, buttered and salted, and light cider to drink. The tent had been tidied and cleaned, and the chamber pot emptied. There was fresh water in the bowl for Scout. High Ever servants were nothing if not diligent. Bronwyn dug into her porridge, feeling better already. This is wonderful, Alistair commented, shoveling it down. I suppose we're so hungry because of the battle yesterday. Grey Wardens are always hungry. Nature of the beast, Alistair mumbled. Really? I suppose so. I remember... She stopped herself from speaking of Duncan, but Alistair guessed what she was thinking. Since you traveled with Duncan, you must have noticed that he hunted a lot. I thought I was already quite the huntress, but I learned heaps from Duncan, Bronwyn told him. We always had meat roasting on our campfire. So Grey Wardens have hearty appetites. What else can you tell me? I need to know everything you know about being a Grey Warden before our meeting with the powers that be. Everything? Well, that might take us nearly to the end of breakfast. To be honest, I haven't been a warden that long myself, and there were a lot of secrets that Duncan said usually aren't revealed until after the first full year. That's brilliant. Well, tell me what you do know. Swallow that bit first, please. Right. Nightmares. No surprise. Already? Afraid so. They're not just nightmares. We're seeing things that really are. Or we're in the Fade along with the Darkspawn that are also in the Fade. Some older wardens say that they can actually understand what the Archdemon is saying. That's interesting, I suppose. It was clear that the Archdemon wasn't happy with us. Anything else? We killed Darkspawn. That part I got. We can sense Darkspawn because of the joining, and they can sense us. Evidently. Oh, Alistair groaned and nearly stopped eating. Oh. Yes. That's obviously how they were able to target all the other wardens. It's how they knew we were going to the Tower of Ishal. Bastards. Let's kill them all. Sounds like a plan. What else? We're needed to stop the Blight. Why exactly? Bronwyn pressed. Not sure. One of those things that would come later. Let's not tell anyone we don't know that. We can look wise and say it's a secret. And it wouldn't be a lie. Duncan told me that the Grey Warden headquarters is in the Anderfels, a place called Weishaupt. Have you ever been there? No, I've never been out of Ferelden. We have a compound in the palace in Denerim. Duncan dropped a hint once that we have some caches of supplies here and there, but I don't know where they are. When we pack up the belongings here, I guess we'll just send the wagons to the compound. Bronwyn thought a bit about that. What about this compound? She asked. Is it just storage in the cellars? Well, no. There's a suite of apartments in the west wing of the main courtyard. Those are set aside for us. We have a dormitory and a refectory and a training room and some storage. We have our own kitchen and laundry and a few servants. It's nice. We have our own entrance and everything because the connection to the rest of the palace has been sealed. She narrowed her eyes, thinking. It would be a roof over their heads, and in the palace, too. But nothing in Alistair's description sounded like a private bedchamber for Bronwyn, which was something she was accustomed to and did not want to learn to live without. She would have to look at the rooms herself and see what could be done. All right, what else? He scraped his bowl, eyeing it wistfully, and then said with some reluctance, Don't expect to grow old. Why is that? We've got about 30 years from our joining. The taint makes us hear Darkspawn, right? Well, after a while we hear them all the time, and that's known as the calling. Once Grey Wardens hear the calling, they go to Orzammar, because there are always Darkspawn in the deep roads, and they go there to die fighting. I see. She pushed her bowl away. 30 years isn't so bad. We almost didn't survive yesterday. What else? Not much. He paused, and his ears turned pink. Out with it, she insisted. Is it something scandalous? Do tell. Well, Grey Wardens don't have a lot of children. This was not funny. Her stomach lurched. She sat very still and asked, "Are you saying that I'm barren now?" "No! I mean, I don't know exactly. I haven't met many female Grey Wardens, and I obviously never discussed that with them. All I know is that Duncan told me once that it's almost impossible for two Grey Wardens to have children." "Do Grey Wardens ever marry? I mean, I didn't take any vows of chastity like in the Chantry, at least that I remember." "I suppose they could marry. Yes, Duncan told me about that couple in Orlais. Not often, though. It's all duty to the Order and kill Darkspawn and whatnot. I haven't heard of any Grey Wardens having children." "Maybe because you don't know many female Grey Wardens. Maybe male Grey Wardens have children all over the landscape, begotten on their many adventures." "No!" Alistair was indignant and horrified. "I'm sure not. I mean, I wouldn't do anything like that." "Aren't there any books about being a Grey Warden? We need to know a lot more." "Well, there's not a Grey Warden manual that I'm aware of. Maybe when the Wardens from Orlais come, they can help us." Loghain doesn't want the Orlesians. At the council before the battle, he and the king had an argument about that. I think he's right. Maybe a few Grey Wardens would be useful to teach us lore and all that, but we don't want the Orlesian royal troops. That's just asking for trouble. The war is over. It's been over for years. The Orlesians I've met have been very decent." "Maybe Grey Wardens born in Orlais are all right," Bronwyn said grudgingly, her voice dark with suspicion. "But Orlesians are always up to something. My father said so, and Loghain clearly agrees. I think he's right to be careful. Meanwhile, we need more Wardens. We should get busy and recruit some. What did Duncan look for when he was out and about? Skill at arms, I suppose, but what else?" "We can't recruit." "And why not?" "I don't know how to do the joining," he muttered sheepishly. She slammed down her goblet, cider splashing, and shouted, "What do you mean you don't know? You must know!" "Well, I don't." Bronwyn bit her lip in exasperation. "We won't tell anybody that either. We'll conscript them, and they'll have a joining later. Nobody needs to know when." Alistair stared at her in surprise, and then grinned. "You are a devious creature. A very good thing, too. Come on, we need to get to the meeting. Wipe your face. There, got it." "Are the Wardens still here?" asked Wynne of the guard outside the tent. Bronwyn turned to see the healer enter, looking them over with calm, clear eyes. "Good morning to you, Wynne," she greeted the older woman. "And many thanks for your help last night. I feel quite all right, really, all things considered." "Perhaps I should have a look," Wynne suggested mildly. "Well, all right, but then I must dash off to see the king and Loghain." Bronwyn nearly danced saying those words. She, Bronwyn Cousland, Grey Warden of only a day, was called to council with the leaders of Ferelden. She hoped she wouldn't grin like a fool when she faced them. Scout gave a happy bark and turned in quick circles, knowing they were going somewhere exciting. Wynn's inspection revealed no lasting hurts, and Bronwyn ran back to her cubicle to take a look at herself in the little mirror she had found in Fergus's chest. She looked pink and breathless, but her face was clean, and her hair as smooth as hair like hers could be. Her armor was fastened correctly and shone without a stain. She would have to do. She ran out to find Wynne examining Alistair very carefully. It was impossible to wait any longer. Buckling on her weapons, she said, "Take your time. I'm going to go on ahead. Many thanks, Wynne. Do help yourself to the cider in the pitcher. Come on, Scout. We're off to see the king." Once outside the tent, she collected herself, and made herself head toward the royal tent with a confident, unhurried stride, head held high. Scout trotted with massive dignity, properly at heel. The guard, enormously tall like all the king's guards, was not one she had seen before. "Halt! Who are you, and what is your business?" "I am a Grey Warden, summoned to meet with the king and Loghain." The man's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You're no Grey Warden. You're some sort of girl warden." Bronwyn's jaw dropped in astonishment, and then she burst out laughing. "Girl warden?" The men inside the tent had heard the exchange. Cailan sputtered into helpless laughter. Loghain only snorted with amusement. With a mischievous look at Loghain, Cailan called out imperiously, "Let the girl warden pass." "As you wish, your majesty." In a low voice, the man apologized. "You really are that girl. Sorry, my lady. Warden." "That's quite all right," Bronwyn said, sweeping into the tent. "It's not the first time I've been called a lady. Or a girl either, for that matter. Your majesty, Loghain," she said to the two men awaiting her. She gave Scout a glance and a discreet gesture. He took his place in a corner, still as a statue. "Warden Bronwyn," Cailan came forward to greet her, very excited. "Well met! We were pleased beyond measure that you and Alistair survived. Is Alistair all right?" "Indeed he is, your majesty, but the healer insisted on examining him. He will be here directly." The king was clearly relieved. Bronwyn noticed the considering frown on Teyrn Loghain's face. But the king was speaking again. "With so many good friends lost," his eyes softened, "the burial details have gathered your brothers most reverently. A great pyre is being assembled in the valley below. Everything will be ready for a proper funeral at twilight. That's Grey Warden custom, isn't it?" he asked, young and earnest. "Twilight, and all the ashes intermingled?" Bronwyn hadn't a clue whether it was custom or not. Clearly the king knew more about the Grey Wardens than she. Teyrn Loghain had as much as told her outright that the king was daft on the subject. If only she could ask questions. But no, it would destroy her credibility, so she simply said, "It sounds most appropriate, your majesty. I thank you for your attention to this amidst all your other concerns." "It's nothing, nothing. If only I could do more. Duncan gave his life to protect me. And you. Without your heroism, who knows what might have happened?" Bronwyn backed away minutely, and felt herself turning red. "I merely climbed a rope, your majesty." "And fought an ogre," Loghain remarked, raising his brows. She glanced at him, and blushed more deeply. "I would have been ashamed for you to see that fight, my lord," she told him. "It consisted mostly of running in circles, trying to get behind the creature and hamstring him." And screaming my throat raw with blinding, bowel-loosening terror, she thought to herself. But that I'll never tell anyone. She assumed a slight smile. "I was prepared for a long climb. The ogre was a surprise." Loghain shrugged. "What matters is that you survived and the ogre did not. You found a way to light the signal when it was needed. Results are what matter in the end. I thought getting things done by whatever means necessary was the watchword of your order." She could not stop blushing, blast it. She had heard all her life about Teyrn Loghain's fierce and disturbing ice-blue eyes, but this was only the second time she had experienced them at close quarters. She could, however, speak calmly, in the dulcet tones drilled into her by Mother. "You are well informed, my lord." "Not so well informed as to understand why you climb ropes so well." "Oh," she smiled, remembering. "My brother and I very often went hunting for birds' nests along the sea cliffs west of Hyaver." "The cliffs of Carnabar!" Cailan exclaimed, remembering yet more thrilling legends. "Yes, your majesty, the cliffs of Carnabar. They are very high and nearly completely vertical. The only way to find the nests was to use ropes and hooks, and, well, we had other equipment too. I never tried climbing the cliffs in the rain." She laughed. "My old tutor told me truly that no knowledge was ever wasted." Her smile faded. "I must ask, has there been any word about my brother?" Loghain shook his head. "None. I sent 2 more scouting parties out this morning, but so far there has been no sign of him or his men. It is possible that he encountered the main body of the horde as he was going east." She was prepared for this, but it was still a struggle to keep her face under control. "Then we shall just have to see what the scouts find. Perhaps I could assist them." Alistair arrived, a little red in the face himself. He bowed in the approved Grey Warden style. "Your Majesty, my lord, sorry I'm late. Healers are determined creatures." "Alistair!" the king greeted him very kindly. "I was telling your sister, Warden, how glad we are that the 2 of you survived the battle." Loghain watched, deep in thought, as the king repeated his plans for the grand Grey Warden immolation to his unacknowledged bastard half-brother. That Alistair was Merrick's son was a secret known to very few. Cailan himself had not known he had a brother until he was nearly 15. So Merrick's sons had both survived the battle. Loghain had not seen much of the bastard before, and had been told he was a non-entity, an unambitious, trifling lad. Yesterday, however, he had been foremost among the party clearing out the Tower of Ashal, and had fought very well indeed, from all reports. Perhaps he was not so trifling after all. Problematic as a royal bastard might be, it was curiously comforting to know that something of Merrick had lived on. He wondered if the girl knew who Alistair was. She was watching the 2 brothers, a minute furrow between the straight dark brows. No fool she. It would not be long before she saw it for herself. The physical resemblance was strong. Both of Merrick's sons looked like their father. There was even a certain resemblance in voice and manner. "Which of you will speak the funeral address? Alistair?" Cailan asked. Alistair's eyes glazed, assuming the look of a small animal in a trap. He glanced over to Bronwyn a little desperately. Bronwyn saw it at once. "I believe I shall, Your Majesty. There is so much I want to say, especially about Duncan." Loghain's mouth twitched in the faintest of smirks. Yes, the girl. Did she understand the significance of giving the address? Probably. She was already taking charge of the situation. And Alistair gave her another look, relieved and grateful. Perhaps not a trifling fellow, then, but a follower, not a leader. A good sword to have at one's side, but not the sword raised in command. The girl was a Cousland, after all. Loghain had remembered her name after their brief meeting. Bronwyn Cousland. She might well have been Princess Bronwyn had her father been elected king 5 years ago, rather than Cailan. Loghain had supported Cailan's cause, of course, but there was no doubt that in the current crisis, Bryce would have been the better king. The last time Loghain had seen her, perhaps 4 or 5 years ago, she had been clad in the bright and costly garments of a nobleman's daughter, her long brown hair whipping about her face as she darted among the booths at a Denerim fair. Was it 4 years ago? 5? She had seen Loghain looking her way and stopped to stare at him with clear grey eyes. A charming child, a bit gawky and coltish, but with the promise of her mother's beauty. The beauty was now in full flower, but the hair was sensibly braided and out of her way, and the armor made her seem older than her years. She had grown tall, too. It had taken him some time to connect her name with the child's face, he remembered. Hal had once referred to her disparagingly as Bryce Cousland's little Spitfire. Some men, when they knew themselves too old to attract the notice of a beautiful young girl, grew spiteful. And yes, Hal had been disappointed in his hopes of arranging a marriage between the girl and his son. Perhaps that might be a factor in Hal's sudden treachery. But how could Bryce have permitted his daughter to join the Wardens? He and Bryce had not always seen eye to eye, but Bryce had been a sound man, with the right idea about the Orlesians. Loghain would have gutted anyone who tried to take Anora from him like that, somewhere between the words invoke and conscription. Young Bronwyn's life had been effectively ruined now. She should have been the greatest catch in the kingdom, but no nobleman would marry a warden. She had forfeited not only her right to inherit the Tairnir of Highever, but any possible right of succession to the throne. It might be convenient for Cailan and Anora and their future children, but it was a sad thing for the girl herself. But a lucky chance for him. The girl was a vast improvement over Duncan and his intrigues. Orlesian influence was gone for the moment, and the 2 remaining Grey Wardens in Ferelden were native-born and bred. Both were very young, and might be amenable to his guidance. The girl especially behaved to him with considerable respect. No doubt the Wardens would send some veterans, but for now things were very satisfactory. "At least the Darkspawn horde has been broken," Cailan declared. "Duncan's death was not in vain." "Yes," Bronwyn said, carefully diplomatic. "It has been broken for now. We should have a breathing space before the next assault." Cailan blinked. Loghain, roused from his own thoughts, looked at her in surprise and displeasure. He noticed that Alistair did not seem to be disagreeing with her. "There will naturally be trouble with scattered pockets of Darkspawn for some time," Loghain said, "after such a large incursion. Only if this were a true blight would we anticipate another large horde to form." Bronwyn looked back at him, surprised in her turn. "But this is a blight. There is an archdemon behind it." Cailan and Loghain exchanged quick, concerned glances. Alistair fidgeted, looking uncomfortable. Cailan burst out, "You really think there is an archdemon?" He looked almost radiant. It irritated Bronwyn beyond words. Loghain, on the other hand, was clearly not happy with her. "Yes," she answered. It would be wrong and cowardly to lie. "There is an archdemon. I have seen—" "Wait!" Alistair interrupted. He whispered at her, "You can't tell them." Bronwyn, more and more bewildered, shot back. "What do you mean I can't tell them? You can't withhold tactical information from the army's commander." "We can't!" Alistair nearly shouted. "It's one of our secrets!" Loghain was growing angry and alarmed. It was one thing for Duncan to hint and obfuscate and raise the king's hopes and everyone else's fears in that measured, honeyed voice he had used to impress the lesser forms of life who were not Grey Wardens. It was quite another for this young girl, a decent Ferelden girl, to blurt out that she had actually seen the archdemon. The most disquieting aspect of it all, however, was that her fellow warden was trying to shut her up, not because she was lying, but because she was apparently telling the truth. She had grown red with anger in her turn, and her palpable fury intimidated Alistair somewhat. You just can't, he repeated, pleading with her. Well, she bit off, it's a stupid secret, but if I cannot speak of it openly, I can say this. There is an archdemon marshalling the Darkspawn. I know it. How I know, I am not permitted to say, but I swear to you that it is not just because someone else told me about it. It comes from personal knowledge. Tairn Loghain was glaring down at her from his greater height. It was daunting, to say the least, but her father had not raised her to back down when she was right. His voice was chilly. And what else can you share with us? She swallowed, trying to recall everything from her nightmare. Obviously, yesterday's assault was intended to crush Ferelden's ability to resist the Blight. It failed in its great objective, but it nearly succeeded in a lesser but critical goal, to eliminate the Grey Wardens, who can sense Darkspawn and... She frowned at Alistair. And other things. With us gone, you might well think the threat eliminated. The Archdemon can afford to be patient and build up its next horde. It cares nothing for its minions, but its pride was dealt a blow. It did not expect to lose yesterday. She met Loghain's eyes. It really despises us, you know. It regards us as mindless cattle, and that we surprised the Darkspawn and defeated them seems to it an outrage against nature. How can you know this? Loghain growled. I am forbidden to tell you, but I do. I swear on the deaths of my father and mother and on my honor that I am telling you the truth. Well, Cailan began pacing back and forth, his eyes sparkling with excitement. A true blight, an archdemon! I cannot wait to face it. Bronwyn did not want to appear a coward, but she found it difficult to summon up any enthusiasm. She looked at Alistair. He clearly felt the same. How could they possibly defeat the monstrous dragon she had seen in the Fade? She blew out a breath and studied the toes of her boots. She had done her duty, but she wondered if she had done more harm than good. And the Orlesians will help us, Cailan went on. You must see now, Loghain, that we will need the Chevaliers. I fail to see anything of the sort, Loghain snarled. You, Warden! He turned on Bronwyn, who struggled not to tremble. Perhaps you've seen, he made the word an insult, how long we have before they next attack? It will be months, at least, before the Darkspawn can amass another horde of similar size. The Archdemon threw nearly everything it had at us. She glanced at Alistair for confirmation, and he granted her a reluctant nod. Loghain gazed at her, his thoughts bitter. Could she be trusted? Was this all imagination and moonshine and a young girl making herself out to be important? She had not struck him as that sort before, but you could never tell. And Cailan's bastard brother was backing her. He looked unwilling and unhappy, but not because he was disagreeing with her about the substance of her claims. Could this be another Grey Warden plot? He would have thought the two of them too young and inexperienced to devise anything so quickly. The girl had spent quite a bit of time with Duncan, traveling south from Highever. He looked over at Alistair and stared him down. The boy was fidgeting and red-faced, but this was not the face of an accomplished liar. Perhaps the girl had influenced him into believing her story. She was so much stronger. He turned his attention to her. Well, Warden? Loghain asked Bronwyn, his face only inches from hers. Are you in agreement that only the Orlesians can save us? She blinked and looked up at him. No, my lord. I don't see horsemen like the Chevaliers being much use against the Darkspawn at all. Horses can't stand the smell, I'm told. Besides, there are other allies we could call upon who are nearer at hand. Which allies? Alistair drew a quick breath of understanding, his face brightening. Bronwyn told Loghain. Treaties with the Grey Wardens obliged the Circle of Magi, the Dwarven King in Orzammar, and the Dalish clans to support us against the Darkspawn. None of them have territorial ambitions in Ferelden, and they are... here. I think we should enforce those treaties before we entangle ourselves with Orlais. I cannot be certain at this point of the exact moment when the Darkspawn will attack, and I'm sure no one wants the Orlesians here for weeks or months, or longer, she muttered, very uneasy. Loghain was silent for 2 heartbeats while he took in this news. It caused him to rearrange his ideas about the two young people in front of him immediately. The dwarves. They had been good allies in the past. The Dalish elves! Cailan was fascinated. Wouldn't that be extraordinary? Men and elves marching to war together against an ancient evil. That hasn't happened since the last Blight. Loghain stepped back from the girl and cocked his head, looking her over. She was nervous, but not actually afraid of him. Was she spinning another story? Do you have proof that these treaties actually exist? Yes, my lord, I have them in my possession. Alistair and I were commanded to retrieve them from an old Grey Warden cache in the wilds when we were scouting before the battle. Duncan had learned of them and was very anxious to get his hands on them. But he left them with you. I believe he thought I was going to be in a safer place than he, so he told me to read them carefully and to keep them safe. Loghain walked away from them and stood quietly considering the matter. His glance traveled over to the girl's Mabari hound, who was lying at his ease by the king's chair. The war dog panted happily and rolled his eyes up at Loghain. There was a brief civil wag of his tail, and the dog's attention then returned to his mistress. "It's a fine beast you have there," Loghain said, almost to himself. Scout grinned and woofed in agreement. Curiously, the dog's presence calmed him somewhat. A well-trained animal, that. It, too, had fought bravely at the Tower of Ashal. The girl and her companions were not frauds, at least in the matter of courage. The Circle. He considered the matter. The Circle sent us 7 mages, and we were told that was all it could spare. The Templars were reluctant to even let that small number go. Bronwyn had been thinking about that, too. That's a ridiculously small number. I know that the Chantry is always worried about maleficars and abominations and all that, but really, I will go to the Circle and enforce the treaty. If there is resistance, she said, her voice hardening, I will invoke the right of conscription as I see fit. Loghain turned to look at her, almost smiling. That was the kind of talk he liked to hear. Rather bold of you. Duncan's approach would have been more conciliatory, I think. Alistair scowled at what sounded like a reflection on Duncan, but Bronwyn said, Of course he would have considered the possible repercussions in ordinary times, but this is a blight. The Grey Wardens must do what is necessary in order to fight it. I am certain that Duncan would have supported my plan, given our circumstances. All right, the Circle, then. Afterward, the dwarves. What kind of support are they obligated to provide? She was glad she had read the treaties through, because she could actually give him some hard numbers about this, and the conversation became more specific and detailed. Loghain was looking, not pleased exactly, but certainly less somber. Cailan was still thinking of the elves. The Dalish are not far. The clan travels through the Brazilian forest this time of year. The Wardens could be there in a week or so. Loghain shrugged. He had seen dwarven warriors in action and knew their worth. He knew considerably less about the Dalish, though he had met many in his younger days. Excellent scouts, of course, but in a pitched battle. The clans are scattered, and have a number of keepers, I believe is the correct term. It will take rather longer to gather them and negotiate their degree of assistance. The dwarves will obey their king. It seems to me that the best course would be to go north to Kinloch Hold and speak to the first enchanter of the Circle, and then continue north to Orzammar. You might even be able to find a boat to take you across Lake Calenhad directly to the docks near Gerland's Pass. He granted a sop to Cailan's fantasies. If there is time when you return, you could then see what can be arranged with the Dalish. Bronwyn nodded, her knees weak with relief. Tairn Loghain was no longer angry and disbelieving. She had pleased him with the news of the treaties. He was giving them good advice as to how to go about enforcing them. Alistair, asked Cailan, are you in agreement with all of this? Yes, Your Majesty, Alistair answered slowly. It sounds like a plan to me. His eyes sought Bronwyn's, and she flashed him a quick smile. Loghain could hardly miss that Alistair was deferring to the girl. So, the de facto Warden-Commander in Ferelden was indeed Bryce Cousland's daughter. She had done well for her first day, he decided. We cannot leave the south for some time, he said, deep in thought. We will scout for signs of Darkspawn and clear out any lairs in the wilds. And our wounded would be the better for not being moved, added Cailan. True, Loghain agreed. There was no great hurry. Anora was more than capable of handling things in Denerim. Let Cailan play at war. In the end, he will no doubt have his fill of it and more. And even when we leave, a strong garrison will remain stationed here." He thought of something else and began. "Warden, you should meet the Mage Uldred before you leave." The guard peered into the tent. "Beg pardon, your majesty, but a wilder girl is out here wanting to speak to the warden." "Which warden?" "The young lady, majesty. The wilder girl says she found something valuable of the warden's. Says it's urgent." "May I, your majesty?" "Certainly." Bronwyn stepped out of the tent, with the alert scout trotting after. She had not far to go, for the men could overhear the ensuing conversation. "It's Morrigan, isn't it? I was thinking about you and your mother, and hoping you were all right." "Thank you," drawled a feminine voice. "We are quite well. Mother was thinking about you as well, and about our meeting. Your courtesy pleased her, you see, and she found you interesting. We were relieved that you survived your ordeal." They heard Bronwyn's soft laugh. "It was a relief to me as well." Loghain glanced at Alistair, who was grimacing. Apparently, Merrick's bastard did not approve of this acquaintance. The strange girl did not sound like a chastened. Her speech was old-fashioned but educated, and her voice musical. "And the battle. Clever of you," she was saying. "At any rate, since Mother liked you, it pleased her to take trouble for you, and thus we found something you had lost. I'm not sure I understand. Its name is Fergus, if you do not wish—" "Fergus!" Bronwyn cried. "You found Fergus! Is he alive?" "He is alive, and Mother is tending his wounds. Perhaps you would care to come and collect him." "Morrigan, thank you 1,000 times! Fergus! I'll order a wagon for him, and we'll go right away." Loghain frowned. This would prevent the girl from leaving for a few days at the very least. That could be unfortunate, but Fergus Cousland's survival would resolve the succession problem at Highover. If the girl had been the only heir, it was possible that Cailan would have wanted to set a bad precedent by letting a Grey Warden hold the Tairnir. And of course the girl was happy at the prospect of seeing her brother. It had been hard for her, losing her parents so violently. He certainly knew that kind of pain. Cailan was too curious about the visitor to remain in the tent. The other 2 men followed in his wake. As they stepped out into the sunlight, the young king was startled by the barbaric beauty before him. A tall and exquisitely formed young woman was draped with heavy jewelry and adorned with feathers. Her face was a perfect oval, and her skin a perfect cream. Her eyes were— He started. The eyes of a hawk, yellow and piercing. Bronwyn saw him coming and introduced them. "Your Majesty, this is Morrigan. She and her mother were of great assistance to us in the wilds. My brother is even now being tended—" "I heard, Warden." He gazed on Morrigan's half-clad beauty. "Our thanks to the preserver of the Tairn of Highover. You will not find us ungrateful." "Lord King," replied Morrigan with a nod, evidently unimpressed. Loghain was amused by the girl's utter lack of swooniness in Cailan's presence. It was too bad that more women did not dismiss him thus. Unfortunately, her cool detachment seemed only to rouse the stupid boy's interest. He glanced again at Alistair, who was openly scowling. At least the bastard had the sense to see that this girl was trouble. Attractive trouble, but trouble and no mistake. The sooner she was out of their camp in the king's presence, the better. It was time to cut this encounter short. "Your Majesty, Warden Bronwyn will want to go to her brother immediately. I shall detail an escort for her protection." "Of course." Cailan was sorry to lose sight of the gorgeous savage, but surely there would be other opportunities.